Number 10. The Joker. The Joker. How the heck does the Joker hold back? He normally doesn't really. There are plenty of occasions where the Joker lets loose and does whatever he wants, taking lives indiscriminately, but that just makes it all the more incredibly villainous when instead he restrains his insane sadistic impulses in order to carry out a completely bonkers plan. There are plenty of instances where instead of straight up taking someone's life, the Joker will toy with them, or leave them on their last legs, or completely break down their character, usually for the purpose of manipulating the individual themselves, their close family members, or more often than not, to torment the Batman himself directly. When he completely messed up Barbara Gordon for the purpose of trying to break Commissioner Gordon, or in Death of the Family when he made the entire Bat family believe that he had sliced off their faces when he actually hadn't. Even the whole thing with Jason Todd. He didn't just take down the Robin, he left him on the brink of the afterlife and rigged an explosion just so Batman could almost save him. Yeah, I mean, so far so good, Adam. Hard to say if this is restraint or if it's just his version of comedic timing, but we're off to a good start. Number 9. Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyzptlk here is probably the best example of someone who is technically a villain and who has no choice but to hold back. If you want to see just how powerful this fifth dimensional imp actually is, all you have to do is read the Emperor Joker story, where his powers are granted to someone who totally shouldn't have them, the Joker. Using this power, Joker eventually causes the end of everything. But Mr. Mxyzptlk? He mainly just uses his abilities to be a pain in the butt and prove that he is smarter than Superman, his favorite superhero. I mean, there's a large case to be made that Mr. Mxyzptlk isn't even a villain at all. The point here is that this imp has the power to completely destroy everything we hold dear, but he knows that, and he has to keep his power in check to make sure that that doesn't happen. He's a villain, but that doesn't mean he isn't responsible. A great choice. What Adam doesn't mention is that Mr. Mxyzptlk is so overpowered that he actually has given himself a weakness to make things more interesting. That being that he will return to his own dimension if you can trick him into saying his name backwards. Kiltipsixum. Number 8. Impossible Man. First appearing in Fantastic Four number 11 all the way back in 1962, Impossible Man is an alien from the planet Papa. The planet Papa is an extremely dangerous place, so its inhabitants evolved to be able to transform into anything their imagination could create. The Fantastic Four first came into contact with the Impossible Man when he went to Earth for a vacation and decided to annoy Marvel's first family. Like Mxyzptlk, he's less concerned with causing harm than he is with having fun at the expense of the heroes, which is good because his transforming abilities have let him go up against several heavy hitters in the Marvel Universe, once knocking the Thing through a wall by transforming his arm into Thor's hammer, and another time getting punched in the face by the Hulk without getting hurt. In one of the most extreme instances of his power, he transformed his entire planet into a duplicate of Earth and tricked Galactus into eating it, causing the Planet Eater to develop a terminal case of indigestion. With power levels like that, it is a good thing he doesn't really go in for planet conquering, because he would be a tough villain to deal with. Not sure if I'd rank him above Mxyzptlk, but they do seem to have a similar deal going on. Number 7. Molecule Man. Owen Reese was an ordinary lab technician who was repairing an atomic device and was caught in an accident that granted him incredible powers. This was actually a part of a plan by the Beyonders to end the universe, but for simplicity's sake, we're just gonna stick with the basics. He was granted the ability to control matter and energy, but due to a lack of confidence, was unaware of the true extent of his power. He originally thought that he had to be using a metal wand to manipulate matter, and also was under the impression that he could only control inorganic matter, but both were actually untrue. He was actually so powerful that the Watcher captured him, believing that he was too dangerous and could potentially destroy the universe. He eventually came back to Earth by reconstructing his body, and for a time was one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe once Dr. Doom helped him realize his true potential. He went toe-to-toe with the Beyonder and helped save the universe in Secret Wars 2. He became less outright villainous as the years went on, with him struggling to overcome madness and be a better person, but at the height of his villainy, it's a good thing that he was unconsciously holding himself back, as he was capable of ending universes with a thought if he wanted to. I wasn't very familiar with Molecule Man, but if all this is true, he feels a bit low on this list. Number 6. Loki. Loki is a god. As such, they have an Asgardian frost giant physiology, which makes them much more powerful than other beings. Loki's also incredibly adept with sorcery, being able to use it to do a whole wide array of different things and grant himself a whole whack of powers. He became the Sorcerer Supreme at one point. Whether it was by his own skill or a trick doesn't matter, he still did it. He's taken on the OG Avengers when they first formed and is just an incredibly powerful guy. But kind of like the Joker, Loki's a planner. His whole thing is tricking people and laying long convoluted plans to give pretty much everyone a bad time. Which means instead of just totally destroying people, which he could do, he toys with people, leads them on, pretends to be their friend, and adds just a whole bunch of not so necessary extra steps into his plans, all for his own entertainment. On a personal note, I recently read the X-Men Alpha Flight crossover from 1985, where Loki grants the humans and the mutants the power to make the world a utopia. He takes away this power and attacks them when the heroes refuse it, but it does prove that Loki could fix all of Earth's problems by himself if he wanted to. He just chooses not to. Number 5. Thanos. This one is pretty simple. Thanos on his own is incredibly powerful, able to be a threat for the Avengers any day of the week. But during his most famous story, where he assembles the Infinity Gems into the Infinity Gauntlet to grant himself the power to do essentially anything, his main goal was to destroy half the life in the universe to impress his girlfriend, Death. He could have done almost anything, and instead of really fully committing, he chose to only bring down half the universe. Half? No man, if you wanted to impress that girl, you gotta give 100%. Thanos did a half measure. What kind of villain does that? Lame. Moving on. So the reason Thanos didn't wipe out all life is because if he did, Death would have become redundant and have no purpose. But Adam is absolutely right. Thanos held back a lot by not killing every living being in the universe. Number 4. Doctor Doom. I don't know if I'd say Doctor Doom holds back his power. I think a better explanation would be that he chooses his time to strike. And personally, or rather Adam, thinks that this is because he just wants to use the least amount of effort possible when he engages in battle. Now, this is obviously not always true. We've seen Doom completely obliterate his opponents on multiple occasions, and he has become the most powerful person in the universe on multiple occasions, using that massive power to do whatever the heck he wants. But let's think about all the times that Doom doesn't actually have to use his power. How many times have we seen Doom just sit on his throne without having to do anything because people know better than to cross him? So many times. His power speaks for itself, and so he doesn't really have to use all of it. Simple as that. But okay, let's think of an example. When his master, the Marquis of Death, came and judged him, Doom got sent all the way back to be swallowed by a megalodon. He had his heart turned to stone and his blood into acid, and not only did he survive, he managed to make his way back to the Marquis of Death, and instead of just taking him out immediately, Doom disguised himself and pretended to be the Marquis' apprentice, just waiting for the moment when he could waltz up and completely slap the guy. Which he did after the Fantastic Four had brought the Marquis down a few levels. I mean, I can't argue that. Plus, think of all the times he delegated with his Doom bots. Number 3. Apocalypse. Some of you may not know just how powerful Apocalypse is. His mutant abilities are immortality and control over his molecular structure, which is pretty powerful. But then he was given a power buff when he interacted with a celestial spaceship and gained celestial armor and 2 different techno-organic viruses that turned into a benefit for himself. Now he can essentially grant himself any power that he wants. Superhuman strength, teleportation, telekinesis, flight, telepathy. He can produce force fields, energy blasts, absorb energy, and even grant power boosts and totally new powers to others. And that is part of the key point here. Apocalypse is famous for his horsemen, who he grants massive power boosts to be his henchmen, but also to enact his true purpose. See, the name of the game with Apocalypse is survival of the fittest, and the evolution of the mutant species. So, while he could completely obliterate the X-Men with his crazy level of power, like he did one time in the animated show, he prefers to send out his horsemen as a test against the X-Men to make sure they are truly powerful enough to carry on. But he's chilled out a bit on that front more recently. Number 2. Battle Beast. Now, some people may come for me, meaning Adam, here saying that Battle Beast is a hero. Some would agree that he is a villain. I'd say, or rather Adam would say, that Battle Beast fights for his own reasons on both sides, as long as it serves his goal. And what is that goal? Literally to pass on to the afterlife in a glorious honor-filled battle. He lives to find his equal and better in combat, so that they can bring the end of his life in an honorable battle. Honor is the key part here. During his fight against Thrag, the unfathomably strong leader of the Voltrumites, he recognizes Thrag's strength and the two go at it. Now, the Coalition of the World organized the use of the Ragnars, which are one of the only species of aliens who have proven strong enough to take down the Voltrumites. Battle Beast was told they would be released only if he failed to take down Thrag. So when they were released at the start of the fight and gave Thrag a massive wound, he was actually incredibly ticked off and decided to stop fighting Thrag and instead help him defeat the Ragnars so that they could have a fair fight. Which Thrag even remarks was stupid, but not only did did he take away his own advantage, but he even injured himself in the same way Thrag had been injured, just so that he wouldn't have any unfair advantage. It's Sigma as hell, but incredibly foolish. Number 1. The Collector. Tanlier Tavon is an Elder of the Universe. He existed in the previous universe, and when it came to an end, he was the only one of his race chosen by the cosmic entity Death to be given immortality and survive in the new cosmos. As an Elder of the Universe, he is almost completely unkillable unless all his molecules are completely eradicated. While he looks like an old man, he has a second form where he gains powerhouse super strength, invulnerability, and cosmic energy manipulation for defense, offensive, and matter manipulation uses. But despite all that power, he time and time again does not use the full force of his power to trap and collect at least one of everything in the universe, including sentient beings. A lot of the time, he doesn't even go off to do these things himself, which he totally could. Instead, he'd rather let others do it. And I mean, when you have literally all the time in the universe at your disposal because you can't be stopped, then yeah, why do anything yourself? No need for urgency. I guess when you consider that the Collector could obliterate most people and only chooses not to so that he can collect them, he's a pretty good choice for the top spot.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Mr. Sinister. Dr. Nathaniel Essex made his first debut in Uncanny X-Men 221. Now, he's not that easy to forget once you take a glimpse at him, because he's kind of terrifying in every way. He's also obsessed with experimenting on mutants, and yes, that includes himself. He was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, but he felt like they were shackled by too many moral constraints. Doesn't that sound lovely? It's off the bat. He couldn't get funding from the Hellfire Club, so he got together a group that he named the Marauders, and then he got them to kidnap people off the streets of London so he can then experiment on them. So dark already, the guy is twisted. He even tried to experiment on his son, who was no longer alive. This guy might be a little bit too twisted for the MCU, but he does bring back dead characters, so maybe he's a blessing in disguise. Number 9, Blastar. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 62, Blastar once was the ruler of Balur, a planet in the negative zone. The inhabitants of said planet were not a fan of this horrible ruling, so they voted him off the island. They revolted and sent him adrift into the cosmos. Now, during that field trip in space, he bumped into Mr. Fantastic, who at that point was already on his way back to Earth with the Inhuman Triton. So Blastar followed them through the portal, teamed up with Sandman, and fought the Fantastic Four. He ended up losing this battle and was sent back to his own dimension, which sounds like a win, but this was only the beginning. He then became king once again, but this time he expanded his territory. It also helped that this time around he stole Annihilus's cosmic control rod. This guy is pretty hardcore, and at one point in the comics, he tried to collect all the Infinity Stones before Thanos. Somebody tell Blastar he's a little bit too late for the MCU. And before we continue on with this list, you know the drill. If you're loving the content, or if you want a part 3, or if you're just liking the curls so far, give us a thumbs up. It really helps us out quite a bit, and then in turn, we can give you back as much as we can. You're the best, thank you so much. Right back to this list. Number 8, Shadow King. Making his first appearance in X-Men 117, the Shadow King is a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness spawned by the first nightmare. Doesn't that sound nice already? Sick. Amal Farouk was the leader of the underground syndicate located in the Thieves' Quarter in Cairo, Egypt. He's a powerful mutant who also happens to be a vessel for said Shadow King. Farouk was able to control everybody around him. It's pretty terrifying. He feeds on the shadows of your soul. So yeah, with Marvel veering off into the cosmic side of things, maybe we could see a Shadow King whenever the X-Men come into the picture. Now in the comics, before World War II, Amal Farouk worked with Baron von Strucker to try and destabilize Britain's political structure. So maybe he's been there the whole time. I kind of hope he's not though, because he's terrifying. Number 7, the Fallen One. First appearing in Thanos issue 11, the Fallen One was once a herald of Galactus, who of course we mentioned in part 1. Now the difference between later heralds of Galactus, this Fallen One was empowered by dark energy instead of cosmic radiation, which was the norm. So in turn, he was quite cruel. He was evil enough that Galactus himself had to imprison him. The Fallen One was also a sneaky one. He would often escape and then re-attack Galactus all over again. It was a vicious circle until Star-Lord came in and imprisoned the Fallen One into the Klin, that prison we see in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now when the Klin was later destroyed during a conflict with Thanos and the Maker, the Fallen One again broke free, went back to Galactus, but this time Galactus teleported him back to Thanos. He's like, no, you go fight him, Mr. Crazy Guy, get out of here. Thanos ended up defeating him, but only because he tricked the Fallen One into igniting a gas giant. At this point, Thanos made him become a herald for himself, right? Might as well. The Fallen One can control black matter, which is a pretty big deal. He can use that matter to enhance his own speed, strength, strength, durability, you name it. You wouldn't see him coming either, because he can travel at the same speed of light. Now, we just got Thanos out of the MCU, so let's never bring back his Herald either. No thanks. Number 6, Spiral. Rita Wayward made her debut in Longshot issue 1. She's actually a loyal servant to the spineless Mojo that we mentioned in part 1 of this list. But it didn't always start that way, of course not. See, Ricochet Rita was once a professional stunt performer. She became friends with a guy named Longshot who was already from that Mojoverse. She was actually attacked by this insane version of herself called Spiral from the future. They fought, she won, and she thought that was the end of that problem. Now you gotta remember that, because it's for sure not the end. Rita actually decided to follow her heart and go back to that Mojoverse with her new boy toy, Longshot. And then when they get there, they're both captured by Mojo. Longshot's mind was wiped, now forgetting Rita, which is so sad already. But for Rita, it just gets worse. Mojo got his scientists to modify her mentally and physically, so now she has 6 arms, and her hair is also gray, and now, oh, she can also see other dimensions. She was like a twisted little version of Mojo, and she got trained in the dark arts of magic and body modification. And as you may have guessed, that future version of her was just that. Mojo sent her new and improved self to go back in time and attack her past self. It's just a nice loop of trouble. Number 5, Kid Omega. Quentin Quire made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths right next to Jean Grey, and believe it or not, he was once also the host of the Phoenix Force. In his early super days, Quentin was one of Xavier's prized pupils, until he put together the Omega Gang. He wasn't always a bad kid though, it's just on his birthday when he was still young, he received a call from his parents to say that he was adopted. And honestly, if I got that gift on my birthday, I'd probably turn evil too. I don't blame the kid. This Omega Gang likes to handle humans the way that they feel like, with violence and mutant monologues. He's been described as an Omega level telepath and telekinetic, so if mutants are too much for the MCU right now, Kid Omega surely won't be around for quite a while. Number 4, Overmind. First appearing in Fantastic Four issue 113, Overmind, aka Grom, was an Eternal born on the planet Young. He was a fierce gladiator whose job it was to prevent overpopulation. He conquered hundreds of worlds, he won thousands of fights, and he took out entire species. He's the champion of champions. Literally, the Eternals held the games to test everybody to see who the most powerful was, and Grom was the winner. He's the ultimate physical specimen of the Eternals, and part of me wants to meet him in the next Eternals movie, and part of me doesn't want to know what conquering planets and thousands of souls looks like either. Let's keep this guy in the books, definitely. Number 3, Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. When Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, they were all under fire, so they had to run and take cover in a nearby cave. Now the cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So just who is this Sidorak guy? And also, nice temple by the way. Sidorak is a powerful entity that is both a god and a demon. Best of both worlds, lovely. He was worshipped on Earth way back in the day, but was eventually banished to the Crimson Cosmos. Sidorak's gem contained all of its power, so when Kane stumbled across it and then decided to read the inscription, whoever touches this gem shall possess the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. Henceforth, you who read these words shall become forevermore a human juggernaut. And then Kane turned into just that. Now we have Ryan Reynolds coming over from the Foxverse into the MCU, and I doubt they would bring over such a high caliber character like Juggernaut as well. He might be a little bit too soon for that. He would literally rip the Avengers apart also. We see Doctor Strange summon the Crimson Bands of Sidorak in Infinity War while the team is fighting Thanos on Titan, so never say never. Number 2, Proteus. Kevin McTaggart was the son of Moira McTaggart and her husband Joseph. Now the marriage was the opposite of healthy. Joseph was abusive mentally and physically and just an all-around horrible human being. So Moira got out of there. She didn't even tell Joseph that she was pregnant. The less he knows the better, honestly. Just move on, get out of Dodge. So young Kevin and Moira soon lived together at her mutant research center off the coast of Scotland. Now Kevin, as he got older, manifested mutant abilities, so now he has this uncontrollable need for power. He craved it, literally. So Moira had to hide him. She had to keep him locked up in a cell for years and only referred to him as Mutant X, which is kind of a dark nickname already off the bat. I mean, sure, could have just still called him Kevin, but great. She wanted to keep him safe and also not have strangers get the soul sucked out of them on their way to work, so that's a bonus. Keep him tucked below. But one day while Magneto was fighting the X-Men, Kevin's cell was damaged and he got out. Since the isosteric energy in his cell was no longer holding him back, Kevin was able to take down Polaris, Multiple Man, and he was even able to evade the Phoenix. But after doing so, his body began to burn out, just like Moira tried to prevent all this time. So now the only solution he has was to possess human hosts, one after another. He renamed himself Proteus, with his imagination the only thing that limits his powers. He's made of psionic energy, and he too can warp reality. Every time he possesses a new host, he gets stronger and stronger and stronger, until eventually the host burns out, and then he warps to possess another poor soul. And finally, number 1, Amora the Enchantress. She made her first debut back in Journey into Mystery issue 103, and her relationship with Thor is... honestly, I'd kind of love to see this in live action, but I feel like we're quite far from this type of power in the MCU. So half the time she wants to take out Thor, and the other half she's trying to take him out to dinner. It's really a love-hate relationship. Now, Amora has a pretty sweet life before all this. She's got multiple mansions throughout all the 9 realms, and can make gold and diamonds with her tears. So even on a bad day, she's still getting rich. She's really good at seducing people as well. I mean, it's literally her superpower. For example, Scourge, she would seduce him into helping her with evil plans, and he was like, oh yeah, you bet, anything for you, you're so hot, let's do it. And then afterwards, Amora wouldn't follow through with her side of the deal. She would just continue to play hard to get. She messes with your mind and your heart. That's a double whammy. One kiss is all it takes for her to completely own you and your soul. In the comics, she was sent by Odin to take out Jane Foster because the whole, loving on different worlds thing is long distance, I guess. That's a no-go for the God Squad. But when she tried to attack Jane, Thor intervened and she was banished to Earth by Odin, where she then joined the Masters of Evil. Now, she doesn't have too much experience with hand-to-hand combat because, well, she doesn't really need it. She just gets other lovers to fight her fights for her. The Bachelorette in space. Nice. Tune in. Love it.
Number 10, Sleaze. Sleaze was originally Darkseid's right-hand man as the new god began accumulating more and more power on the planet Apocalypse. Eventually, Darkseid grew tired of Sleaze's depravity and banished him to Earth using his Omega beams for the very first time. He was stranded on Earth for hundreds of years, making a home for himself in the sewers underneath a slum in Metropolis. Despite not having done much during his many years on Earth, he is actually extremely powerful, being able to dominate the minds of others. He could use these powers to control the governments of Earth or install himself as a ruler, but he refrains from using his powers to their full potential, deciding to instead use them for relatively small-scale crimes. For example, in his first appearance in Action Comics number 592, he uses his mind control power to kidnap Big Barda, forcing her to star in adult films that he sells to a local producer. When Superman shows up to stop him, he manages to bring Superman under his control as well. What does he do with the opportunity most villains could only dream of? Having the Man of Steel himself as a mind-controlled servant? Does he rob banks? Does he make Superman knock down buildings? No. In the next issue, he just tries to make another video starring Superman and Big Barda. Fortunately, Barda's husband, Mr. Miracle, stops his scheme before things get too spicy, but it's lucky Sleaze lacked either the ambition or the imagination to use a mind-controlled Superman to his full potential. Number 9, Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is of course the arch-enemy of Superman, who is both a genius inventor and a ruthless billionaire who moonlights as one of the most dangerous supervillains in the DC universe. Lex doesn't have superpowers in the traditional sense, but he is so intelligent that it is essentially a superpower that has allowed him to come up with everything from his battlesuit to the cure for cancer. Now, if his only goal was to take over the world, he probably could, but he has to hold back on this to a certain extent, as he is also obsessed with maintaining his public image. If Lex were to own the fact that he's a supervillain and just go ham, he could probably be very effective at it, but all of his plans end up taking a lot longer than they have to because he has to make sure that he can't be linked to them and that his reputation stays intact. On the one hand, this is practical, as he certainly doesn't want to end up in prison if he's stopped, but on the other hand, if it weren't for his pathological need to be beloved by humanity, he could save himself a lot of effort. On the other hand, if he chose to put his brain towards good, he probably would be one of the most beloved minds on the planet, but his greed and lust for power prevents him from reaching his full potential on that front as well. Number 8, Black Adam. Teth Adam was a member of the Kandaki tribe in ancient Egypt whose people were forced into servitude by a cruel pharaoh of the time. Most of his family was killed, but Teth Adam was able to escape with his nephew Amun when the wizard Shazam brought them to the Rock of Eternity to make Amun his latest champion. Amun learned that he could share his powers with Adam, and the two returned to free their people. Amun wanted to find a peaceful solution, but Adam felt that peace was not an option and wanted revenge. So he killed Amun in order to gain his power for his own. In the present day of the DC universe, he is the ruler of Kondak, and sometimes a member of super teams like the Justice Society. He kind of flip-flops between being an anti-hero and a straight-up villain. His enchantment from the wizard Shazam has granted him the strength of Shu, the speed of Horus, the strength of Amun, the wisdom of Zahudi, the power of Aten, and the courage of Mehen. This gives him super strength, speed, flight, and lightning casting abilities that make him capable of taking down most of the heroes of the DC universe with ease. Despite this, he doesn't usually go in on the whole conquest thing and sticks to his home country. This is due to a deal he made with the Justice Society that says that they won't interfere with his rule if he promises not to expand his borders. It's a good thing he mostly sticks to this, as when he did decide to cut loose and start World War III, he was a menace to stop and was responsible for the death of millions of innocent lives. Number 7. Magneto. When Max Eisenhardt was a young man in Germany, he was subjected to many atrocities at the hands of the Third Reich, who sent him to Auschwitz for no reason other than being Jewish. He eventually escaped and became known as Erich Lenscher. He discovered that he had the ability to control the powers of magnetism, and after the war, used them to track down former German soldiers. He developed the belief that mutants and humanity could not coexist and became Magneto, a mutant dedicated to mutant superiority and the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He is what is known as an Omega-level mutant, being capable of amazing feats such as defeating the Avengers by himself, taking control of the Earth's satellites to hold it hostage, and causing a massive EMP that shut down all technology on Earth. But because his goal is to make the world a better place for mutants, he can't use his full powers, which could destroy the entire planet. In the Ultimate Universe, Magneto reversed Earth's magnetic poles and caused a massive tidal wave that destroyed most of the heroes of the Ultimate Marvel Universe, as well as countless civilians. Let's hope his regular 616 counterpart doesn't feel the need to go down this route anytime soon. Number 6. Brainiac. Brainiac is a complicated villain whose goals change depending on which version of the character you're looking at. Originally, he was an alien whose goal was to kidnap cities so that he could repopulate his home planet, but this was eventually retconned so that he was trying to collect as much knowledge as possible so that he could become the smartest being in the universe. Part of how he achieves this is to go from planet to planet in his skull-shaped ship so that he can steal a city, which he then puts in a bottle for further study before sabotaging that planet's sun so that the planet will be destroyed, making him the sole owner of the information. What I find relevant for this list is that destroying the planet is the easy part for him. What tends to take the most time is getting the city bottled and shrunk. He achieves this with an army of robots and a special shrinking beam, but it does take time, usually enough that Superman is able to stop him. So Brainiac could destroy the planet without getting particularly close and wipe out all of its population, but as he needs a sample to study, he is forced to go through more complicated and elaborate means to accomplish his ultimate goal. Number 5. Orphan Maker. When a mutant named Peter was taken from an orphanage run by Mr. Sinister by a mutant named Nanny, he was fitted with a battle suit that made him impervious to most types of damage. Him and Nanny go about a twisted scheme of saving mutants by taking them from their non-mutant parents, who Peter then takes out, earning himself the nickname Orphan Maker. The battle suit makes him an incredibly powerful foe, but also acts as a power dampener for his as of yet unrevealed powers. However, Nanny has stated that his power is world-ending, and if unleashed would leave no survivors on the planet. So whatever he's holding back, it must be pretty powerful. I honestly couldn't find much info on his potential powers, but if you know something I don't, please let us know in the comments below. Number 4. Lucifer. Lucifer is of course a fallen angel who rules Hell. He ruled Hell for over 10 billion years, growing tired of the various stereotypes that mortals had come up with about him, claiming that he stirred evil in their hearts and bought and traded souls, all of which were untrue, as he simply punished the souls who ended up in his realm. He eventually chose to leave, banishing all the souls and handing the keys over to Sandman and going to Earth to open a bar. He is still evil, I mean he is the devil, and he has an incredible amount of power, being immortal and nigh omnipotent, and being able to manipulate reality at will. Something interesting about him though is that he chooses to always keep his word and never lie. This isn't some weird rule that he is forced to follow, he just has a specific code of honor that he chooses to stick to. So even though there have been times where he's been tricked by characters like John Constantine and could just not honor any agreements and kill him, Lucifer chooses to keep his promises. Number 3. Galactus. Galactus is an incredibly powerful cosmic being who travels the galaxy, consuming energy-rich planets in order to sustain himself. For thousands of years he did this himself, consuming every planet he came across until eventually he came to the planet Zenla, where he met Norrin Radd. Radd spoke with Galactus and pointed out that traveling the universe searching for planets was using up a lot of the energy that he was getting out of eating the planets. Galactus admitted that this was a less than ideal situation and agreed to spare Norrin's planet if he would become his herald, finding planets on his behalf and then essentially ringing the dinner bell. Norrin became the Silver Surfer and served Galactus for many years. So, while Galactus is capable of using his own powers to find the planets, he holds back and lets his heralds do the task for him, as if he cannot find a planet to consume and runs out of energy, he risks death. Number 2. Ares. Ares is the god of war and frequently tangles with Wonder Woman, being the main villain in her first feature film. In current continuity, he's a lot more chill and actually works with Diana a lot of the time, but we're going off of the new Earth continuity for this one. Ares gains his power from conflict on Earth, often stoking the flames of aggression to get people or countries to go to war. The more intense the war, the more powerful he becomes. However, he is in the difficult position of having to keep people in conflict without letting the conflict reach too much of a boiling point. For example, if he helped start a third world war, that would be really good for him, but if that war escalated to the point where the planet wiped itself out, it would be really bad for him, as there wouldn't be enough conflict to sustain his power. This means that he has to hold back so that he can hit that sweet spot of conflict in the world. Number 1. The Beyonder. The Beyonder is an ancient being from a race known as the Beyonders who exist on a plane of existence beyond the limits of our known universe. When he was accidentally taken to Earth by a group of supervillains using a tachyon beam, he became curious about Earth and decided to stay as an observer to learn more about humanity. He became interested in humans' tendency to be constantly searching for meaning, something foreign to him as he thought he was everything in the universe. When he discovered that this was not the case, he developed an existential crisis of his own and decided to search for meaning by starting the Secret Wars, where he transported the heroes and villains to Battleworld to make them fight. Among his many powers is the ability to manipulate reality, and once took over the entire Earth with a mere thought. He can also erase the memories of everyone on Earth so that they forget meeting him. He could potentially end the planet with a thought, but holds back as he is still trying to learn about both himself and humanity. He has since been made less powerful than he was in his initial appearances, but in his original form, he could easily have been the end of the Marvel Universe if that had been conducive.
Taking off the list at number 10, the Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, the Time Trapper comes from the far future. He actually prevented the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future using an iron curtain of time. He likes to hang out at his home located safely at the end of time. How neat is that? Kinda similar to Kang. In his first few issues, the Time Trapper was seeking the Concentrator, which was a weapon that draws energy, any energy source in the known universe, together. It's also a pretty big secret as well. The Time Trapper pretended to be the commissioner of the Science Police and tortured the Legionnaires, although they said it was a test in order to gain intel. Now, Lightning Lad knew something was fishy, so he cracked and spilled secrets, false ones of course. So this brought the team to actually figure out how to assemble the real Concentrator. And when an angry Time Trapper returned, he launched a plethora of Dark Stars at the crew, but luckily that Concentrator could absorb any energy source, like I said, so they were blasted out of existence. We're good. The Legion lived to tell the tale, but we just got Kang in the MCU, so I don't think we need another Time Lord showing up. My brain hurts enough already. Give us like 5 years and then bring in some more time stuff. Number 9. Eclipso. Making his first appearance in House of Secrets issue 61, Eclipso was made from God's spirit of wrath. He's the living embodiment of Wrath. It doesn't get more menacing than that, folks. He was made to punish the wicked, to clean the world of evil, of course, until the Spectre replaced him. Wrath was driven by anger, whereas vengeance, that required more of a discerning hand. So what happened after was Wrath's physicality was trapped within an all-black diamond called the Heart of Darkness. The Heart of Darkness, kind of like the heart of the ocean, but instead of Rose tossing it overboard, a treasure hunter found it in Africa and accidentally split it into 1,000 pieces, and now we're all. Each of those pieces contained a shard of darkness. So Eclipso figured out a way to possess people through these diamonds, and that first man being possessed was Bruce Gordon. Bruce was a scientist specializing in solar energy, and while he was in a jungle observing a solar eclipse, a sorcerer named Mofir attacked him with one of those black diamonds, and after that, every eclipse, Eclipso would take over Bruce. Unbeknownst to Bruce though, Eclipso would soon learn to bind himself to anybody near any shard that happened to be angry at the time. Nowadays there's a lot of angry folks, so this is bad news. The entity of Wrath possessing anybody who gets upset, that sounds, yeah, just smile and wave, I guess. Just lie. Just lie and pretend you're happy. Then you're good. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to spread the love and hit that thumbs up, it really does wonders for us at the channel. You guys are amazing. Thanks so much for watching. Let's keep this going. Number 8, Justice Lord Superman. Coming from the animated universe, the 2003 Justice League episode titled A Better World showed us one that's rather the opposite. This parallel universe showed Kal-El and the Justice Lord storming the White House after President Lex Luthor had just executed the Flash. Now the team of course wasn't too happy, so Batman and Wonder Woman fought off the Secret Service while Superman told Luthor that he's taken him in. Lex is insane, so he had a button ready that could literally start a nuclear war if it was pressed. And he's threatening Superman, saying that he needs to use deadly force if he wants to save the people. So Superman's like, okay, and then just eyes glow red, and then he turns them into ashes, just like that. And when Batman and Wonder Woman come back in, it's far too late. Superman just has a smile on his face, and Lex is just a pile of dust. Good times. After this, for the next 2 years, the Justice Lords would rule using violence like it was normal. They saw this and they're like, well, that certainly did the trick. Let's just keep doing that. Justice Lord Superman used his heat vision to wipe out all of Earth's criminals and villains. If we had him in the dceu, the movie would be a lot shorter than 4 hours. It would be like 36 minutes. Snyder cut, maybe 44 minutes. Number 7, Superboy Prime, another super menace. First appearing in DC Comics Presents issue 87, this version of Supes has more powers and less weaknesses. I'm talking immunity to kryptonite and magic, which is a fantastic combo. He arrived to Earth and was soon discovered by Jerry and Naomi Kent while they were on a hike in a New England seacoast town. They named him Clark, although Clark Kent was the name of a popular comic book hero named Superman. So yeah, Superman already existed on this Earth, so Clark grew up and later attended a costume party at a beach and dressed like Superman. He went to get a glimpse of Halley's Comet and it was all a good time, and then all of a sudden a tidal wave hits, this portal opens up, and the Superman from the comics pops out. Now at the same time, young Clark's powers manifested and he quickly learned what to do with them in the moment. Superboy then followed that Superman back into the portal to an alternate reality, and he would never be the same again. Crisis on Infinite Earths was this multiversal catastrophe where parallel dimensions were being consumed by the Anti-Monitor, who I'll talk about later. Superboy dove in, joined the fight, but was unable to prevent the destruction of his Earth. So Superboy Prime and other survivors escaped to a paradise dimension that Alexander Luthor Jr. offered. Using crystals, Superboy just relived happy times in this paradise, but eventually he got frustrated and shattered the barrier of reality. He literally punched everything apart. He retconned quite a bit in DC continuity. For example, he brought back Jason Todd, he combined Superman's origins, Doom Patrol was now rebooted, and we had numerous incarnations of Hawkman and the League of Superheroes. I feel like DC could use a big bad Superboy Prime punch to clear up the timeline, but hopefully the Flash movie does that, because this guy is just a little too crazy. Number 6, Brainiac. Another close rival of Superman's, Brainiac made his first appearance in Action Comics 242. This guy right off the bat is a very specific villain. He would love to steal cities. Yeah, watch out for your cities, keep them safe, put them under your mattress. He took Metropolis at one point. This guy's wild. He would use his shrinking ray, shrink your city, and then take them back to his planet. Vril Doc started his days as a scientist, and one day he successfully cloned himself because he needed an assistant, so who better to hire than yourself? He built the spaceship next and traveled to the cosmos, gaining knowledge and studying alien organisms with the help of his robot drones, and during these travels he came across Krypton while General Zod was still running the show. So of course, this dude shrunk down the entire city of Kandor and studied it in his ship. He made a remote scout unit that believed it was the original Vril Docs, and then it traveled to Earth and took over the body of sideshow mentalist Milton Fine, whose stage name was Brainiac. Now it makes sense. Number 5, Necron. Also known as the Lord of the Unliving. Great. Necron made his first appearance in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps issue 2. He's literally the embodiment of death. Necron figured out the land of the living existed after the death of an immortal caused a rift to open between dimensions. So Necron saw all of this life and he was like, this looks tasty. He wanted it. Well, really he wanted to master it and get out of his hell, his literal hell that he was living in. So he resurrected Krona, even throwing in a classy army of the dead to assist in taking down the Guardians of the Universe. Taking them down ended up widening the rift, so it took all the Green Lantern Corps to stop them, but even after winning, countless lives were lost in this fight. Hal Jordan ended up going to the land of the unliving, accepting the possibility that he may just never return, and there he gathered the souls of other fallen lanterns, and it was just enough to fight off Necron and return, with the Guardians sealing the rift promptly afterwards. But like Necron says, you can never defeat death. Back in 2009, it was revealed Necron was behind the Black Lanterns and instigated the Blackest Night event. There he took over the bodies of Wonder Woman and Superman while also bringing back dead heroes to join his side. Number 4. Prometheus. Helmets are pretty important, especially in combat, and especially if one helmet in particular gave you the skills to beat, I don't know, Batman. Prometheus first appeared in New Year's Evil, Prometheus issue 1 back in the late 90s, and at first he was just the son of two criminals who traveled across the US, real Bonnie and Clyde style. But as a kid he would have to go with them, right, because they couldn't afford a babysitter. They were rich with like mob money, but they couldn't afford a babysitter. Okay, so eventually the police caught on and they were never seen again. The police killed them in front of the boy, almost like a darker Bruce Wayne origin. So he grew up with their fortune, only it was a stolen fortune. Then he traveled the world, trained as a fighter, trained as a mercenary. He learned a dozen different languages and he was pretty skilled by the end of it. Then he found the ancient city of Shambhala where their monks studied evil. They trusted him and showed him their greatest treasure, which was an alien ship. Not too bad. Their leader was actually an alien in disguise. He landed there, but Prometheus had to kill him to obtain the key to enter the Ghost Zone. The Ghost Zone was this infinite expanse of white emptiness, the space between dimensions. Kryptonians called this the Phantom Zone. And in there, Prometheus built himself a house, a costume, and his first advanced helmet that downloads info to take on the Justice League. He was great, like he shot Martian Manhunter so then he couldn't change, he infected Steel's armor with a virus, he hypnotized Huntress, and he hit Green Lantern with a neural shaft so his ring was useless. He also trapped Zoriel in said Ghost Zone and beat Batman with hand-to-hand combat. Not too shabby at all. Number 3. The Batman Who Laughs. We've seen quite a few Batman on screen. We're even seeing Michael Keaton return to Gotham in the next Flash movie, which is pretty exciting. But the Batman Who Laughs, aka The Darkest Knight, might be a bit too hardcore for the theaters. Coming from the Dark Multiverse, first appearing in Dark Days The Casting, created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, comes a twisted Earth 22 version of the Batman Who Laughs. The Joker here is insane. He goes on this spree throughout Gotham, just chaos in the streets. He took out Jim Gordon, then he poisoned Batman. It was all bad, and then once Batman was able to move again after the poison had run its course, he broke the Joker's neck, which is already immediately so dark. But even the Joker was prepared after death. After that snap, he let out this toxic breath that let everybody near him get infected, including Batman. Cut to 2 days later, Batman and Superman are talking about what happened, and when Superman tells Bruce that a kid infected by Joker bit a doctor, Bruce ends up laughing, like this maniacal laugh. And he catches himself after, he's like, sorry about that. Superman knows something's off here, but a day later, Bruce called the team to the Batcave and went full on Omni-Man. He took out the entire team before anybody caught on to his new and violent personality. Number 2. The Anti-Monitor. Making his first appearance in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 2, the Anti-Monitor was DC's excuse to cut out a lot of fat from the comics, basically. The multiverse was introduced back in the 60s. The Golden Age heroes were residing on Earth 2, and then came Earth 3, and then so on and Danforth. So when Crisis on Infinite Earths came around, DC Comics introduced this big bad cosmic villain to set something straight going forward. Clean up the multiple timelines, makes sense. Now it all started when Krona performed this experiment. They wanted to see the origin of the universe, but instead an opposite universe was created, the antimatter universe. Anti-Monitor wanted nothing but death and destruction, and after battling his brother for, say, I don't know, 1 billion years, they both fell unconscious. And then 9 billion years later, they were woken up. When they tried to destroy Earth 1, many heroes lost their lives, and in order to stop that chaos, Superman had to punch them into a star. Who knows, with the Flash opening up the multiversal door, we could see him on the big screen in our lifetime. Maybe. And finally, number 1, Perpetua. Of course, one of the most feared beings in the greater Omniverse. Also known as the first creator, she made her first appearance in Justice League Volume 4, Issue 8. She was the mother of the Monitor, Anti-Monitor, and World Folder. She was actually one of the hands that created the multiverse, literally. Each member were these celestial beings and they would pass on and their energy would return to the source, but Perpetua was different. She wanted a dark, vicious reality that would live forever. So she created the first iteration of the multiverse using negative crisis energies and then had 3 cosmic children. She was creating an army also to rule over the multiverse, so her children snitched. Yeah, they told the judges of the source, and Perpetua was locked away outside the source wall with her negative energies. But even locked away, she was able to connect to Lex Luthor, who believed freeing her would make him a hero on some multiversal scale. Kicking off the list at number 10, Matthew Malloy. While we're eagerly awaiting the arrival of mutants into the MCU, there's quite a few mutants that I wouldn't want hanging out near Peter, Ned, or MJ, like Matthew Malloy, for example. See, Matthew was a regular Joe living in Charleston, South Carolina, but all of a sudden Earth gets hit with a Skrull invasion. Gotta love Mondays in the Marvel Universe. Sick. Things escalate when his wife Jules is vaporized by a blast from said Skrull ship, and his home was also just toast. Just a complete tragedy from the start. Now, one depressing, dark, lonely year later, he sees his late wife's sister, and they finally catch up. And it's hard for Matthew, of course, to talk about this stuff. This is still just a year ago, so it's all very fresh. So he's feeling it, and that's when his mutant powers decided to manifest. He erupted with energy, sadly also ending the life of Jules' sister. Not looking good so far. And then while he's standing there in shock, Maria Hill's hologram shows up out of a drone and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you a mutant? What are your powers? What's going on? Do you have Geico?" He's a little stressed out on what's happening, so he freaks out a little more. So she sends in a strike team, and this just caused him to release even more energy and take even more lives. S.H.I.E.L.D. ended up sending in an airstrike, and that ended the lives of Cyclops, Magic, and Matthew, but those powers were better than we thought, because Matthew came back to life. Immortality for the win. Next, he teleported to the Jean Grey school, where he then took the life of Emma Frost. Now, Tempest at this point decided the only way to take care of this beyond Omega level threat was to go back in time and make sure his parents never meet. Then we can avoid having this supervillain from exploding over and over again. There's a link there, page 10. Mutants are cool and all, but this is evidence of how a regular guy can be riddled with tragedy in the Marvel Universe. Imagine if Zemo got these powers, Civil War would be over in like 22 minutes. Number 9, Molecule Man. Owen Reese started his days out as a small, puny, ridiculously looking laboratory technician whose life changed forever one day at work. Also, that's how the Watcher described him. I'm not being mean. He's breaking down his origins to the Fantastic Four, and he's low-key roasting the guy the entire time. It's pretty great. He was working for Acme Atomic Corp, but one day he got distracted and made a mistake while making adjustments to that atomic machine. He was distracted because he was monologuing about how much his life sucks. He was like, "Oh, I'm just a nobody wearing green pants at work, boo-hoo, no one knows my name." And then in the middle of his pity party, he gets blasted with energy, but somehow he survives. His boss of 12 years calls him in the office and he's like, "Hey, I heard about your accident, Mr. whatever your name is. We can't have that happen here. You're fired." Which, first of all, as far as lawsuits go, could you imagine? But Owen doesn't pack up and leave. No, instead, he pulls out a wand that can control his powers and he turns Boss Man into a snow cone. He can now control every molecule in the universe, and like Reed Richards says, if a man can control molecules, he can control anything. Guy's really brilliant with that groundbreaking assessment. Thanks, Reed. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It's a lot of dark, tragic stuff going on here, so let's brighten the mood a little bit by doing a little hitting that button. Thanks so much, you guys are the best. Back to this list. Number 8, Mad Jim Jaspers. Old Jimmy J. Okay, he made his first appearance in Daredevil's number 7 back in 1983. He was created by Alan Davis and Alan Moore, and when he first hit the pages, he was a British politician serving as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was serving as a member of Parliament for Haslab West, and he wasn't a fan of superheroes either. He wanted to keep Britain safe, and superheroes crashing through buildings and punching each other in the back, no thanks. Sounds like the opposite of safety. They're old school, I get it. But he also wasn't alone. Many others agreed with him, and in turn, he won a general election. Only 2 issues after he's introduced, we find out he's a mutant with reality warping powers. who of course is also insane. He was just taking out other heroes so that he could rule secretly. Classic little twisty twist. He created and used this machine called the Fury, which hunted down superhumans. Meanwhile, he would be off committing crimes with his Alice in Wonderland themed gang. I know Disney loves crossovers, but I think this would be a little too weird. Number 7. Mephisto. In a list of villains too powerful for the MCU, clearly Mephisto is on that list. We thought he was going to be the one pulling the strings in WandaVision, but as the catchy theme song revealed, it was Agatha Harkness all along. Mephisto made his first full appearance in Silver Surfer issue 3, and he's been making deals with everybody since. Like when Spider-Man revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, that led to a bullet striking Aunt May, so he offers Peter a deal while Aunt May is dying in the hospital. The world will forget Peter Parker is truly Spider-Man, but in turn Mephisto gets his marriage. It's kind of like Shrek 4, but way more fun. And this movie's probably gonna make way more money than Shrek 4. I mean, maybe, hopefully, I hope. You don't even need to be a superhero to have an eventful night with Mephisto either. Like in Journey into Mystery issue 627, he would show up to a random pub and he tells the bartender a story, and if you listen to his tale, he'll give you a nice fat tip. But if you slip up, things can get pretty ugly. Next time you get that really annoying regular at your bar, just think, it could literally be the devil and be a lot worse. Consider yourself lucky. Number 6. Vulcan. The younger brother of both Cyclops and Havoc, Gabriel Summers made his first appearance in X-Men Deadly Genesis. Before Catherine Summers even had a chance to give birth to the third child, he was transferred into an incubation accelerator, so he grew up real quick. After this, he was sent to Earth to work for Eric the Red, but luckily he didn't stick around to let that happen too long. He changed his name quickly from Gabriel to Kid Vulcan, which sounds way cooler already, but it was also inspired by Roman mythology. I guess the other names already belong to DC characters. But Xavier eventually met him, and because of his mental powers, he knew that this boy was a relative to the Summers family. Vulcan had forgotten about his history at this point as well, but he suited up with Petra, Darwin, and Sway, and together they rescued the original X-Men. It wasn't easy though. Cyclops thought Vulcan had died when the island decided to fight back. Vulcan is an Omega level mutant, and he's also insane. What a jazzy combo. Vulcan can manipulate, absorb, and control energy. This includes Cyclops' optic blasts or even Adam Warlock's energy. And of course, interstellar flight makes those cosmic commutes nice and smooth. Number 5. Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created from the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in turn Magneto ripped the adamantium from his bones, which I've mentioned on other lists before because that's one of the more painful encounters I've ever seen in comic books. His healing factor then had to work overtime, and Xavier at this point decided it would be the right move to just shut Magneto's mind down, so then he made him catatonic. But during this exact moment, all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' subconscious, creating this new personality, Onslaught. Onslaught is quite lucky, because now he gets to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane where he can manipulate matter and energy. I mean, let's get X-Men into the MCU first, and then we'll start talking about evil mashups and swaps. Number 4. Mojo. Making his first debut in Longshot issue 3, Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of TV entertainment for the universe. Just like the team over here at Top 10 Nerd, the more views he gets for this interdimensional TV show, the more powerful he gets as well. So if you didn't hit that like button, now you really have to. So in the 1992 issue titled Mojo's Media Madness, he had this wild storyline where Mojo gets Rogue, Cyclops, Beast, and Wolverine, and they all think that they're characters from The Wizard of Oz. It sounds fun, but for the MCU this would be way too stupid, dare I say. The comic is crazy enough. I mean, we see his madness really unfold in X-Men issue 10. Mojo is a unique villain. He's part of a race called the Spineless Beings, and they're from a planet named after him called Mojo World inside of a pocket dimension called Mojoverse. It's just all about him, eh? Wow. So this race of spineless beings were also slowly going crazy over time because TV signals from other space-time continuums like ours were scattered into their timelines. He's a powerful sorcerer. We're not exactly sure just how far his magic can go. We'll stick to watching these guys on our TV rather than having them sucked into a interdimensional Netflix, you know? That sounds better. Number 3. Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17 and then making his first full appearance in X Factor issue 5, Apocalypse was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was abandoned by his tribe because of the fact that he looked different. He had the Blue Man Group avatar vibe going on, so they left the child. How mean. Later on, he was raised by the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive. So already such a tragic childhood. Now in the desert, along came Baal of the Crimson Sands, leader of the Sandstormers, and he saw this kid crying and he also saw potential, because clearly he was different. So he named him Ansabenur, which translates to morning light. He grew up becoming the most feared in the land, and eventually Baal led him to Ramatut's time ship in an underground tomb. Now Baal didn't survive this cave expedition, but Nur was now determined to be anything but an abused worker. Now he wanted revenge on Ramatut, the pharaoh ruler. And after being thrown into a pit of snakes, Nur grew in size and strength, easily defeating all the guards before finally declaring himself Apocalypse. We had this guy already in the Fox verse, but it didn't feel too great. I think we should let that wound heal a bit before bringing him into the MCU with the X-Men. Maybe like 8 years, then we'll talk. Number 2, MODOK. Making its first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 93, MODOK was created by Dr. George Tarleton. He had worked with the team recently to create the Cosmic Cube, but the scientist supreme, Lyle Getz, figured the next logical step was figuring out a way to understand the powers inside said cube. We see this happen a little bit in the MCU. So enter Project MODOK, yes, spelled with a C at the end instead of a K. That's important, you gotta remember that. MODOK stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Computing. It sounds like a high-tech series, sounds perfect. What a great way to analyze and probe this cosmic cube. So they grabbed that scientist George that I mentioned and altered him into this big-headed supercomputer. That's when things start to go south, obviously. With a brain too big for his body, they had to give him a hover chair, which is referred to as the Doomsday Chair. Already it's downhill. This scientist did not know that with great power comes great responsibility, so it wasn't long before MODOK overtook his masters, changed that last letter from a C to a K, making his new, more suitable name for the list, MODOK, Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing. He's the big bad in the new Avengers game that's not too good, but it's still worth a play, and yes, he's as crazy as it sounds. And finally, number 1, Galactus. Wielder of the power cosmic, this one has to eat planets in order to survive. Yummy. We saw him in Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Well, I mean, we saw a cloud that sort of looked like him, I guess. Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. Let's talk about him. The Great Destroyer made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 48. He's the sole survivor of the 6th incarnation of the multiverse. But originally he was a humanoid named Galan, born on a previous version of Earth called Planet Ta. It was a paradise whose civilization was much more advanced than any other in the universe at the time, which sounds quite lovely. But when the cosmos were soon ending the embodiment of the 6th infinity, the sentience of the multiverse approached Galan and merged with him. So now Galactus resides in the 7th iteration of his universe, which is home to our Earth 616. He's extremely powerful. He once ate all the Infinity Stones, so maybe we'll just keep them hidden in case he's off his desk for now, just to be safe. Guys, there you have it. Those are 10 villains too powerful for the MCU, but never say never.
And at 10, Firebrand. A superpowered enforcer for Justin Hammer, Firebrand is a former activist who turned to violence after believing peaceful protests produced no results, which sounds awfully familiar now thanks to the Flag Smasher's introduction, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. First appearing in Iron Man Volume 1 number 27 from 1970, Gary Gilbert was born in Detroit, Michigan. Gary wore a suit with an armored exoskeleton that gave him superhuman strength and resistance to fire. It also housed flamethrowers, which allowed him to shoot out, fire, and thermal blasts from his hands, one mounted on each wrists, and flying jets that gave him the ability to fly, which I'm pretty sure sounds familiar at this point. Except with the Flag Smashers having already been introduced, and no Iron Man remaining in the MCU as a counter, Firebrand making an appearance seems a little far-fetched. It's still entirely possible, perhaps this version gets inspired by the Flag Smashers, and maybe Peter or someone has to end up dealing with them, but it would be on a much smaller scale, since with all the movements, Marvel could be worried about upsetting people, and I don't think that they would handle, I don't know how they would handle this one. In at 9, Spy Master. First introduced in Iron Man number 33 in 1971, the original Spy Master was leader of the Espionage Elite, and they were a formidable opponent for Iron Man, and successfully infiltrated Stark Industries on more than one occasion. Man, it's like Star Labs, you just walk in the front door. He's also evaded Iron Man's grasp multiple times. After his operative Mark Sharon was killed by the Ghost while using the Spy Master identity, the original Spy Master just let the world believe that he was dead. Others have attempted to assume the role as Spy Master, but none really did all that well. Years later, he returned to action after being found by Norman Osborn, but quickly returned to the shadows. He owned a supervillain club, and when the Avengers left Earth in order to battle the Builders, he gathered a group of supervillains and then broke in Stark Tower to steal Iron Man's technology, because the tower was basically defenseless. And while this could be plausible, seeing how Iron Man is dead so his compound would remain partially unguarded, I don't think that the MCU is going to go this route. even if the character has been around for 50 years. It was actually 50 years this January, which is kinda nuts. And it ate Blizzard. Dr. Gregor Szczepanka, PhD, was an employee of Stark Industries. He was conducting private research into a means of achieving physical immortality when first introduced in Tales of Suspense number 45 in 1963. However, he attempted to rob a private vault of Anthony Stark so he could obtain microtransistor designs that Szczepanka had intended to sell to further finance his research because, he was trying to be immortal. And that's what everyone does when they want to be immortal. However, he was caught and unsuccessful because, it was stupid. I guess he didn't have the Thieves Guild training like I do. I'd show the tattoo, but I have a full sleeve on and a suit, so I can't really, but still. Anyway, he was brought before Stark, who then fired him, understandably, because, he tried to steal from him. Subsequently, Szczepanka also created a suit that could generate intense cold, which he had hoped to slow his own aging process. He then started using the suit and its abilities to commit crimes in order to, get more money to fund more research, because, everyone needs that villain. Doc Ock, Jack Frost. Well, the news media had called this new criminal Jack Frost, which is an insult to the man who played Jack Frost in The Santa Claus 3, who also played Mr. Honeywell on How I Met Your Mother. Anyway, he later changes his name from Jack Frost to Blizzard, and eventually the suit comes into the hands of Donnie Gill, who assumes the title in 1987 after Gregor's death in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 20 in 1986. And it's 7 Crimson Dynamo. Technically, in a sense, Crimson Dynamo was already introduced into the MCU. However, his actual name of Anton Vanko was introduced to the MCU as the father of Whiplash, which I think just proves my point alone as to why Crimson Dynamo is too powerful for the MCU. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 46 in 1963, the Crimson Dynamo's armor was equipped with an array of miniature electrical generators that allowed him to generate and manipulate electrical fields for a variety of effects, including but not limited to electrical blasts, electrical override, and a disruptor field that could be used to scramble electronic devices. Wonderful. The character was so strong that they had to make a new character named Ivan and make him Whiplash, who was introduced into the comics in Iron Man vs. Whiplash, but in the comics, he was also named Anton Vanko, with no relation to the Crimson Dynamo. It's confusing as hell. And at 6, Titanium Man. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 69, nice. From 1965, not as nice, Boris Bolsky quickly rose through Soviet government ranks and became popular in the Communist Party. He had also briefly worked with Black Widow as an intelligence agent, but due to political reasons, he was assigned to Serbia. He learned that some of the camp members were scientists that had worked with Anton Vanko, who, as I mentioned last number, was the Crimson Dynamo. So Bolsky planned to make a new armor set capable of defeating Iron Man to prove the USSR's superiority over the US, because of course that's why. A titanium alloy armor was made, however, and it was much larger and heavier than Iron Man's, due to the camp lacking sufficient resources to design micro-components. Because, Tony Stark built this in a cave with a pile of scraps! Bolsky was unable to defeat Iron Man on several occasions. However, I don't think this character would be introduced because they already made reference to him in the first Iron Man movie, where Stark made his suit a gold titanium alloy, which I thought was funny since people were calling him Iron Man, but in reality it was gold titanium alloy man. But that line now makes more sense with this. Plus, Tony's dead, so I don't think they could want to beat Iron Man unless they go after Pepper Potts or something. Halfway through into number 5, Fin Fang Foom. Okay. Let's be honest, most of the supervillains that heroes fight are at least similar to them in some way. Most of Iron Man's villains have some form of robotic suits like his, but less efficient. Spider-Man's are mostly animal themed. However, when Iron Man went up against an actual fucking dragon, we all seemed a little bit confused. That's Fin Fang Foom for you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, well, he's not an actual dragon, but for a while the Mandarin, who was working with Finn, did actually believe that he was a dragon of myths and legend. The two together ended up conquering a third of China, and honestly, that's kinda nuts. However, it was revealed that Finn was actually an alien and that his fellow aliens were coming to conquer Earth, resulting in Mandarin having to team up with Iron Man and War Machine to stop it. I'm sure Mandarin regretted this decision after he found out that, he's an alien. I don't think the MCU is going to introduce Finn, at least yet. But honestly, I don't know anymore with the whole multiverse, and now there's more happening, and a dragon turns out to be an alien. It's par for the course at this point. But I think that Fin Fang Foom is a little too much for the MCU. you. In at 4, Ultimo. Like I said last number, most supervillains at least base part of their persona off the hero, because we all know villains just want Senpai to notice them. MatPat, I'm still waiting on you. Getting MatPat to notice me will literally be my supervillain origin story. Anyway, Ultimo is no different, however he didn't really do this to himself. Ultimo is a giant robot created by an alien race that the Mandarin had taken control of. The cool one, not the actor. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 76 in 1966, Ultimo only died recently in 2020, Force Works number 3 in June of 2020. While Ultimo was under his control, however, Mandarin claimed that Ultimo was his own creation. The only thing though that Mandarin actually created, besides changing his programming, was an artificial blue skin for the robot. Yeah. Mandarin utilized Ultimo numerous times against Iron Man, including once in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. During that battle, Iron Man trapped Ultimo beneath the Earth's crust, and as a result, the robot meandered through the planet's magma. And you know what that caused him to do? Not melt, but absorb more power. Years later, when Iron Man was in battle with like a rock creature who was called the Earth Mover for some reason in California, Ultimo re-emerged without his blue skin, significantly taller and much more powerful. He vaporized the Earth Mover in a second and destroyed a remote unit of Iron Man, and then went on just destroying everything he could. So safe to say it's probably a little too much for the MCU. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Count Nefaria. Count Lucino Nefaria was the descendant of a long line of Italian noblemen, and he inherited a vast fortune. If only. Introduced in Avengers number 13 in 1965, damn, these guys are old, Nefaria was fascinated with technological advances, and throughout his life commissioned scientists to create inventions that were far in advance of their current scientific standing. After allowing himself to be experimented on though, Nefaria was granted absurd levels of super strength, speed, and energy projection strong enough to make him a danger to any and all superhero teams. That's why Nefaria was introduced as a generic Marvel Universe villain in the Avengers instead of just an Iron Man rogue, and has had several run-ins with both the Avengers and the X-Men. And while we've had some powerful adversaries in the MCU, I think that at this point, the super strong, fast, and energy projecting Count Nefaria is going to be saved for another Avengers movie at least, or maybe even a new big bad if they get that far. But I think that it's probably going to be a little much. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Mandarin. Okay, so while the Mandarin might technically have been introduced in Iron Man 3, he was used as a MacGuffin. The Mandarin wasn't actually a villain. He was just an actor who was covering up the actions of Aldrich Killian and AIM, since Mandarin's iconic 10 rings hadn't been introduced yet, which is kind of proof enough as to how the Mandarin was too powerful. And then comes the latest MCU installment, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. You've got to be kidding me. I'm actually upset that they introduced these because it totally ruins the ability to correct the Mandarin. You can't introduce the correct Mandarin now, unless they end up using the name because they were inspired or something, but at this point it's been so long that it wouldn't really make any sense. The McLuhan Power Rings grant the Mandarin insane powers, like manipulation of atomic and molecular structures, beams of force, vortex generation, disintegration beams, creating areas of darkness, lighting fires from a distance, mental manipulation, electrical blasts, and intense cold and ice control. How is this not the next big MCU big bad? Because he's too powerful. They literally had to make it Kang, because they're like, oh, we're gonna introduce the 10 rings, but oh no. No. Finally, in at number 1, Temujin. Temujin is actually the son of the Mandarin, who ends up inheriting the 10 rings, which already makes him as powerful as his daddy. However, this in combination with his ability to focus chi to give him super strength makes him even more powerful than his father, even nearly killing Iron Man once and for all, which would have been absolutely insane. So it's safe to say that this guy has to be number 1, since he literally has the same powers as the real Mandarin and then some. Hopefully they don't make this guy into an actor or something ridiculous like that. That seems just
Number 10, Purple Man. Purple Man is one of those villains who appears unstoppable because if you try to stop him, he can kinda just command you to stop what you are doing and even potentially kill yourself. Dr. Doom ended up using his powers to rule the entire world, which makes his power set kinda crazy. However, it does have at least somewhat of a limitation or weakness, which is nice. Those with indomitable will, such as Dr. Doom himself, can resist the influence of Purple Man's pheromone-based abilities. Also, in theory, if you can't breathe in the pheromones, then his powers have no effect on you. Still, even with his weaknesses, in the Jessica Jones Netflix series they did a good job of making the Purple Man, or Kilgrave as he's known, played by David Tennant, feel like an unconquerable foe and a horrific threat. Number 9. Griever at the End of All Things. The Griever at the End of All Things was a villain who randomly shows up in Fantastic Four in 2018. She claimed her purpose was to survive beyond the edge of existence and mourn its loss when everything had finally come to an end. For some reason, she did not like the fact that the Future Foundation was attempting to create new universes using Molecule Man's help. She felt they were taking on a role that was greater than them. She had just been introduced when she managed to obliterate Molecule Man, who was previously known for being an indestructible and very capable villain before all of this, overpowering in his own right. And yes, this random villain, who has only thus far appeared in 3 issues, handily defeated him. Hopefully we'll see more of her because she was given so much power right off the bat that it would be weird to have her kill Molecule Man, tie her to the existence and death of everything, and then just never have her pop up again. Her and her weird buff tardigrade looking minions known as Endlings. At least they look like scary versions of tardigrades to me. Number 8. Juggernaut. I really appreciate just how overpowered Juggernaut really is. To really appreciate just how overpowered Juggernaut really is, you have to understand who he is first. Juggernaut is really Kane Marco, the son of Dr. Kurt Marco. Kurt would later become the stepfather to Charles Xavier, making Charles Kane's brother when Charles's mother Sharon married Kane's father. While Charles is a powerful telepathically powered mutant, Kane is not. He's just a regular guy. That is, until he accepts the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which grants him unlimited amounts of strength, durability, and stamina. He is rendered immortal with the gem's powers and is therefore unstoppable in a fight. Only entire superpowered armies or insanely powerful enemies are really able to disable him, which is pretty crazy considering at the end of the day, he's just a guy with a gem. Number 7. Carnage. It's funny how we all thought Cletus Cassidy had maybe finally kicked the bucket a few times over the years, and yet he's often just come back instead stronger and even more crazy. His character transformation really serves the point I was trying to make earlier of how in comics it always feels like writers are trying to outdo themselves. Cletus went from being a crazy serial killer who was already fairly dangerous and terrifying on his own to being merged with the young symbiotic offspring of Venom, Carnage. Combined, they wreaked so much havoc and mayhem that Venom and Spider-Man were forced to team up in an attempt to handle the villain. In Absolute Carnage, resurrected Cletus bonded with the Grendel symbiote to create a new and improved, even more terrifying symbiotic army which threatened to awaken the big, cosmic, symbiotic big bad known as Null, the first god of the Abyss and the god of symbiotes. During the Absolute Carnage event, Carnage terrorized the entire Spider-Verse and Marvelverse when he worked to track down and hunt any and all characters who had ever bonded to a symbiote, which, it turns out, is quite a lot of people. Number 6. Apocalypse. He's a really hard one to beat because he's always evolving. When evolution is your mutant power, it means you can alter your physiology to become ever stronger, ever more invincible, and ever more powerful, which is exactly what Apocalypse does. Add in the fact that he also used celestial technology to modify his body, and you have a foe who is virtually undefeatable. Basically, you join Apocalypse or you die. There isn't a lot of wiggle room usually. Fortunately, right now he's more on the good side, working with those he normally opposed to ensure the survival of mutants in a much less violent way than normal for him. Thank goodness, because even with all the mutants of the world coming together now, Apocalypse is still not an enemy they'd be able to easily deal with. Number 5. Super Skrulls. I mean, even if we're just talking about regular Skrulls, they're pretty overpowered in terms of all that they can accomplish. Skrulls are an alien race with the ability to shapeshift, allowing them to infiltrate the ruling government and military forces of a planet. But Skrulls didn't stop there. When Skrulls were first introduced in the Fantastic Four in the 60s, one thing they couldn't do was adapt to a being's superpowered abilities. That didn't stop them though from using technology to try and emulate the powers of the Fantastic Four, however, as they impersonated them. That didn't stop them though from using technology to try and emulate the powers of the Fantastic Four, however, as they still tried to impersonate them. In the end though, their technology and not so ingenious plan was their downfall, and the FF won the day, outsmarted them, and thwarted a Skrull invasion of planet Earth. Years later though, we learn of Super Skrulls, who succeeded where their ancestors had failed. These are Skrulls who are given specific superpowers which also allow them to infiltrate the ranks of Earth's superheroes, eventually creating mass paranoia among the superhero community. As if there wasn't already enough mass paranoia with just regular Skrulls. Number 4. Galactus. When Galactus comes for you, you better hope you have someone powerful on your side. like Squirrel Girl. No, I'm not joking. In the unbeatable Squirrel Girl series from 2015, Squirrel Girl ends up taking on the big, hungry cosmic threat herself and ends up preventing him from feeding on the life energy of the Earth. Surprisingly, Squirrel Girl is also OP in her own way. The thing about Galactus is although he's filled with the power cosmic, which makes him nigh undefeatable in most cases, it also makes him super hungry. He burns a lot of calories just existing, which is why he is forced to feed on planets. His need to feed makes him a villain because he opposes our hero's main objective, which is usually to protect the universe or the Earth, but it also means that his intent isn't primarily malicious. The guy is just hungry. And while he is a literal massive threat, because he's massive, he's also needed to ensure balance in the cosmos. So he's kind of both a villain and a neutral figure, and sometimes a hero. Number 3. Thanos. Now of course Thanos in the comics is still a big deal, but in the MCU I feel like they really beefed him up even more. So much so that a lot of people compare Thanos to Darkseid. Thanos is kind of like Marvel's Darkseid equivalent, even in the comics, sure, but the MCU really lifted him up to be on the same level as DC's Darkseid and make him once again worthy of that comparison. Thanos is also obviously super overpowered in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he is armed with the Infinity Gauntlet and wielding all 5 Infinity Stones. If you can survive doing so, makes almost any character unstoppable. But even in the comics, when Thanos has not been armed with the gauntlet, he has managed to decimate entire planets and threaten the existence of life on Earth and throughout the universe time and time again. It's the Mad Titan's strong will and determination, as well as his physical might and prowess, that makes him so deadly, not the Infinity Gauntlet necessarily, whether or not he has it in the comics or the MCU. Strong without it. Number 2. Phalanx. The Phalanx are believed to be the creator of the Technarchy. They're an alien race that flies around assimilating planets, draining them of all their energy and absorbing all their resources and knowledge. Once your planet is infected, there is not much that can be done. They will either kill you or have you join them. They often destroy planets by infecting them with the techno-organic virus, which spreads and attracts the Technarchy, who don't even know that they are pawns of the Phalanx and were created by them. What's more, once infected, there is not much you can do at all to defend yourself against that virus, unless you are an Omega level telekinetic mutant like Cable, which, you know, most people aren't. Number 1. Mephisto. Mephisto is one of the biggest, most overpowered villains around. He can alter reality, trap you in another dimension, is a master manipulator and deal maker. He's basically Marvel's version of the devil. In fact, Mephisto is pretty content with being compared to or referred to as the devil, although he is yet to be confirmed as the devil itself and is instead believed to be just an extremely powerful demon. And I mean extremely powerful. To highlight just how powerful, we are going to talk about the latest issue of 2018's Avengers, issue number 34, which just came out. So, spoilers ahead. Warning, warning! Moon Knight has been up to some pretty suspicious activity recently in preparation for what will be, from what the Moon God Khonshu has shared with Mark Spector, some great threat. It turns out this OP threat was none other than Mephisto, or at least Mephisto was a part of it. And it took all the powers and relics that Moon Knight had taken from other heroes in order for him to defeat Mephisto once and for all, apparently. But, you know, we'll see. Not even Khonshu himself seems pretty confident in that. While Mephisto's powers may have strange restrictions, dying in mortality has not been known to be a weakness of his in the past, and overpowered villains who are defeated or who die in comics are usually more likely to return even more powerful than stay dead.